Welcome to the Newsworthy. All the day's news in less than 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. Today, we're talking about the FBI report expected, the presidential alert yesterday, and the Chronicles of Narnia Netflix series. Those stories and many more in less than 10 minutes. Plus, hang out after today's news for Thing to Know Thursday. Today's bonus interviews tell you what you should know and do because of Facebook's recent data breach, with a couple different opinions. I'm Erica Mandy. Today is Thursday, October 4th. You ready? Let's do this. Today is the day. Senators are expecting to see the FBI report on the Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh. But there are some strict restrictions on that report. First of all, it won't be made public. All 100 senators and some aides are allowed to have access to it, but the Hill reports there can only be one paper copy, literally one physical copy of the report, and each political party will take turns looking at it for 1 hour at a time in a secured room. No pictures or photocopying allowed. In fact, one aide said senators aren't even supposed to share any details from it after they see it. Still, there could be leaks, so we'll see. But what type of info will this FBI report even have in it? NBC News says it's actually not any FBI findings or opinions about who may be telling the truth. It's more summaries of what was said in any FBI interviews over the last week. Remember, some senators requested and the president eventually ordered an FBI investigation into the allegations against the nominee. The request was made the day after a public hearing when Kavanaugh and one of his accusers, Christine Blasey Ford, testified in front of lawmakers and the world. Stay tuned for updates about the report. An update now about the suspicious letter sent to the Pentagon and the president. It turns out they didn't actually have the poison ricin, but the AP reports at least 2 of those envelopes did have what ricin is made from, castor seeds, which can be dangerous if you swallow them. And now the FBI says there's been an arrest. A 39-year-old U.S. Navy veteran in Utah was taken into custody. No word about a possible motive yet, but no one was hurt. First Lady Melania Trump is in Africa this week on her first big solo international trip. And it's her first trip to Africa. It's a 5-day trip that started on Tuesday. She'll stop in 4 different countries. Yesterday, the BBC reports she was in Ghana and visited a slave fort there. She's also stopping by schools, shelters, and hospitals with a focus on the well-being of children. It's all part of her Be Best campaign she announced earlier this year. If you have a cell phone, you probably got a loud alert on it yesterday. It was the first nationwide test of the presidential alert system. It's put out by the federal government, and it's meant to be used to warn Americans in a widespread disaster or other emergency. Of course, this warning message sent to phones yesterday around the country explained that it was just a test and no action is needed. All of the country's major cell phone carriers participated in this to make it possible. And remember, it was originally scheduled for last month, but it got postponed because FEMA was responding to Hurricane Florence at the time. By the way, there's been a lot of talk about it coming straight from the president, and some people finding that good or bad, but CNN says Trump doesn't actually write this or even hit the button. Another round of Nobel Prize winners to tell you about. The Nobel Prize for Chemistry now goes to 3 people, Francis Arnold and George Smith in the U.S., as well as Gregory Winter in the U.K. The Guardian reports their work led to new best-selling drug and biofuels using nature's own evolutionary processes to design molecules. Winter and Smith will split one half of the prize for their work, and Arnold gets the other half for her work on enzymes. Next up, the Nobel Peace Prize is expected to be announced tomorrow. It might be the first exomoon ever found. Astronomers believe they've discovered the first known moon outside of our solar system. Scientists say the moon is estimated to be the size of Neptune, which would make it the largest moon we know of. It seems to be orbiting a huge planet 8,000 light years away. A quick break now for today's sponsor, Babbel. It's the #1 selling language learning app in the world. You can use it to learn pretty much any language you want. Spanish, French, Italian, German, Russian, Swedish, and more. What I really like about Babbel is 2 things. 1, there are short lessons, just 10 to 15 minutes, so you can make progress without having to commit an hour plus each time you log on. And 2, it focuses on real-life practical situations, the kind of conversations you would actually have in that language. So chatting with new friends, ordering food, asking for directions, that sort of thing. And it's not just boring flashcards either. Babbel has interactive dialogues and fun trainers and quizzes. There's even speech recognition. So go ahead and give it a try for free. Yep, it costs you nothing to see what Babbel is all about. Just go to Babbel.com or download the app and try it for free. That's Babbel, Babbel.com, or download the app for free, Babbel.com. Now, back to the news. Delta Airlines may soon have free Wi-Fi mid-flight. But it's not exactly clear when this will actually start. Forbes reports the CEO said at a New York conference that yes, there is a plan in the works to give customers what they say they want: fast, free connectivity. But again, no timeline. So for now, it's still something like $16 a day to get Wi-Fi in the air. Uber scooters are officially here, joining the pretty long list of companies now offering up electric scooter rentals. Uber just launched its scooters this week in Santa Monica, California, as a way to test it out. Riders there will now have the option to get an Uber car or rent a Jump bike or scooter, all from the Uber app. Uber bought the e-bike company Jump, which now has expanded into scooters. Lyft and other companies also have their scooters available in Santa Monica and other cities. But speaking of Uber, a new rideshare study found Uber drivers are not earning that much money, less than $10 an hour. Recode reports the median hourly pay is higher, $14.73, but it drops below $10 once you take into account the typical expenses for a driver, like gas and insurance. Recode says it's important because the popularity of gig economy jobs, like driving for Uber or Lyft, is growing. It's now about 5% of the workforce in the U.S. Forbes' annual list of the 400 richest people in the U.S. has a new person at the top for the first time in 24 years. Amazon's founder and CEO, Jeff Bezos. He has a net worth of $160 billion. Forbes says he's also the first person to appear on the list with a fortune of more than $100 billion. Microsoft's Bill Gates is now in second, Warren Buffett is third, and Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg is fourth on the list at $61 billion. The youngest? Evan Spiegel, founder of Snapchat. He's 28. The list also shows a philanthropy score of 1 to 5 for each person. Netflix will soon be bringing you The Chronicles of Narnia. Variety reports Netflix is working on a new series and film projects based on the iconic book series. It's apparently the first time the rights to all 7 books of the Narnia universe have been held by the same company. And that's it for the main news today, but it's now time for Thing to Know Thursday, where we learn about a different topic from a different expert every Thursday after the news. Today, we're talking about the most recent Facebook data breach, Facebook's largest breach ever. Here's the gist of it. Facebook says hackers may have gotten into 50 million user accounts through some bugs in Facebook's code. The company says it's since fixed the issue and logged out anyone at risk. But the investigations by Facebook and government regulators around the world are still going on. So today we'll hear from 2 experts with somewhat different opinions about how serious this is and the steps you should be taking. So first up, you'll hear from Mark Ray. He's a former special agent with the FBI's Cyber Division. He's now the managing director of Nardello & Co.'s Digital Investigations and Cybersecurity practice. Then you'll hear from a guest we've had on the show before. Dennis Yu was nice enough to come back. He's the chief technology officer of the digital marketing company Blitzmetrics. He's also an internationally recognized lecturer on Facebook marketing, and he used to work in analytics at Yahoo. Each interview is only a few minutes long, but packed with a lot of info. So we start with cybersecurity expert Mark Ray. Hi, Mark. Thanks so much for coming on The Newsworthy.
Thanks for having me, Erica.
So first of all, I want to get your take on how serious this particular data breach is and what we know so far about what hackers were able to do with any of the data they got.
I think it's pretty serious. I think it's very serious. And there's 3 reasons I say that. Number one, look, for Facebook as a company, it couldn't come at a worse time, right on the heels of Mark Zuckerberg coming off of Capitol Hill. Second of all, look at it from the user's perspective. Information that they thought was private may or may not have been made public to at least this individual or group of individuals responsible for this attack. So it's very concerning. And then the third thing is the data itself. The volume of data is unbelievable in terms of the scale. 50 million users, who knows how many terabytes of data this is, or petabytes. And what do you do with that information? You know, it ties a little bit to the motive. You're not going to go sell it. We're not talking about 50 million credit cards getting stolen that someone may make some fraudulent charges about. How do you monetize it? That's the real concern to me. Could it be to extort people, to blackmail them, to perpetuate other attacks? These are the real concerning things of what that information will be used for down the road by whoever's responsible.
Can you give us an idea of a real world example of how this information could be used?
If someone was trying to be blackmailed, a government official, a high level executive, there's a lot of information that I assume people have assumed was private on Facebook now that they didn't want public. And, who knows? That's now that information presumably is out there in the hands of some nefarious individuals.
There's been a lot of information about these third-party apps. We all know that you can often use your Facebook login to sign into other apps like Spotify, for example. So should we be concerned about those other apps and any steps that we should be taking?
I wouldn't go as far to say that they have been exploited or compromised, but I would certainly say that if you think you're a part of this compromise, if you received that logout from Facebook and you use your Facebook credentials to log into other services, just be safe and change your password on all those. I think you should assume that those accounts are at risk.
And that's a really good point. So let's be clear about that if you were logged out by Facebook and you don't think that you logged yourself out, that's a sign that you may have been involved in this data breach.
That's right. I think, and I applaud Facebook for taking that action. In an abundance of caution, they force a log out. And I think that's how most Facebook users who were a part of this found out.
Because of new privacy laws that were just enacted in Europe back in May, it sounds like Facebook could face a pretty hefty fine for this data breach. Do you think that they should face that fine in Europe, and why?
Well, I think they're going to be the first real case study for how GDPR affects organizations. This is a perfect example of the conundrum that comes into play with large data breaches, where organizations are now faced with not only triaging the incident and responding to the incident, kicking these attackers off of their network, trying to secure their network, but they also have to wrestle and deal with the regulators at the same time. It used to be somewhat serial, but now it has to be at the same time. So it makes that burden that much heavier, if you will, for organizations.
Final question. Other than logging out of some of these apps, is there any other step we all should be taking?
Yes, there's two steps specifically. Number one is be a good steward of your own data. What I mean by that is we shouldn't rely on public or private entities to protect our data. We should know what we're putting out there. As individuals, we should take steps to keep as much data as possible off of the internet. I know that's easier said than done, but the more we harp on that in the security industry, the better. The second thing is use the technology that these services provide, such as two-factor authentication. It is almost becoming the industry standard, but unfortunately for many services, it's still optional. And what that is basically another step, if you will, the second factor of logging into your account. Not just a password, but getting a code texted to your phone that you have to enter. It just gives you another layer of security.
And now for a slightly different perspective, at least in a couple of ways, here's my interview with Dennis Yu, the Chief Technology Officer of Blitzmetrics. Hi, Dennis. Thanks so much for coming on The Newsworthy.
Thanks, Erica.
Let's start with how serious you think this really was.
I think that when people want to see something bad, then they're going to see it independent of the facts. And Facebook's always been very traditional when it comes to protecting data, and they collect data for sure. They're very aggressive about collecting data, but the way they've locked down the data, it's nearly impossible to get at.
So in other words, are you saying that people don't really need to worry about this?
I think people need to worry about their privacy in the sense of what information other networks like Facebook being the biggest one, has. But I don't see an issue. Maybe I'll have to eat my words someday later, but I don't see an issue with somehow people being able to hack Facebook and get that data and use it for nefarious purposes. Anytime you have security risks like this, it's always going to be an internal risk where some internal employee, like a Snowden, is going to try to make off with that data.
So in Europe, Facebook could be facing a pretty big fine. Do you think that will actually happen? And it sounds like you don't think it's the right move.
International governments want a back door into this data that's available. Who would you trust with your data, Erica? Facebook, Google, or a government regulator who has just responded, a 70-year-old guy who doesn't understand how online networks work? The governments, they don't have the technical sophistication to be able to properly police of Facebook. So every regulation actually reinforces the position that Google and Facebook has, because it's just more rules that are harder for incumbents to follow. The EU asked us to, Logan and I, to fly out to explain what's going on with Facebook. So we're teaching the folks that run social media at the different countries in the EU about what this means and how it affects GDPR.
Bottom line, should we as consumers, Facebook users, should we take any steps because of this data breach?
Anything that you put on Facebook, if it were to be public, any kind of post, any information about you, anytime you're using the app, just assume that everyone could get access to that and you'll never be in trouble. Where people get in trouble is things that Facebook can't police. For example, these silly apps where it says, hey, share this thing with 10 people and you'll get $100 from Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg. Or fake news. How is Facebook really going to solve that problem? That is a general education, idiocy of the general public kind of issue. It's not because of a technical data breach. It is the American population, if we're talking to US folks, that don't really understand what happens on a social network.
And as always, you can read more about the breach and both of today's guests in today's show notes. That's also where you'll find links to all the news stories we talked about in this episode from the homepage of thenewsworthy.com. Just click episodes and find today's date. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends if you enjoyed it. The Newsworthy is ready for you by 4 a.m. Eastern Time every weekday, so I'll be back with more news tomorrow. Have a great day.